It's January the 31st, 2015, and this is 508, a show about Worcester. Today on the show, we're going to talk about journalism. Also, a little bit about sidewalks, hopefully a little bit more than that, about winter clothing. Today on the show, we have
Mark Henderson
of
the Worcester Sun.
Very nice. And today on the show, we have Brittany Durgan of being a private citizen now, formerly of Worcester Magazine. Guys, I'm really glad that both of you are on the show. We want to talk about Worcester journalism at the top of the show. And I feel like a lot of things have happened in the last few months around Worcester journalism. Brittany has left being the editor of Worcester Magazine. The Telegram and Gazette continues to be sold on a regular basis, and everyone fired. Tom Kaywood, who was one of the great reporters on the Telegram and Gazette, recently left because he was just like, I think that they want, it's like a bad relationship. If like they're a lot less into this relationship than I am, maybe I should move on and do something else. I think about a great photo in Stuart Brand's book, How Buildings Learn, where it's rephotography. It's the same photo of a house in the woods that's been abandoned year after year. And year after year, it just sort of looks like, here's a house in the woods, and yeah, it's getting a little shabby, but whatever. And then one year, the windows break out. And then the next year, it looks substantially worse. And then the next year, it is on the ground. That the house looks fine, even as the inside of the house is rotting out. And then one day, a wind knocks it over. And I sort of feel that way about Worcester journalism this year. I think not everybody has such a negative feeling as me about this, but that's where I am. Anyway, I just want to sort of start the conversation framing it where I'm coming from like that. You, Brittany, are coming from being an editor and a reporter and a photographer for a number of years in the city of Worcester. Mm-hmm. How did you get involved in doing journalism in Worcester?
I came from California, where I started as a staff photographer. That's what my degree was in, straight out of undergrad. And I knew I loved journalism, and I started writing a little bit when I was at the daily paper in California, and I wanted to try a sort of different type of journalism, and so when the opportunity came up to come back to New England, where I am from, and work at an alternative news weekly, Worcester Magazine, I jumped on board.
Mm-hmm. And then you did different jobs there for a while.
I did. I started as a photographer, did a little bit of writing, a few audio slideshows, multimedia pieces, and then became online editor. Mm-hmm. And I became interim editor when Doreen Manning, former editor, left, and ended up enjoying what I was doing, and went to the publisher at the time and said, I really like this. And he continued with interviews, and then it was decided that I would stay in that position. So.
And how long were you the editor for?
2.5 years.
Wow, it's a long time.
It is, but you look back and there are people I know that have, done it for much longer.
Yeah, so. Worcester Magazine had a time where there was a lot of turnover in the editors, and then like Doreen was the editor for a substantial amount of time, and then you were the editor for a substantial amount of time. Things kind of calmed down on that front there. Mm-hmm. And then after 2.5 years, you decided to do something else?
I did. I'm going back to school, studying library and information science, which actually is very, very similar to journalism in a lot of different ways.
Okay.
I'm particularly interested in public libraries, mainly because I think it's really important to get people the information that they want, need, and that they can use on a daily basis to make their lives better. And I feel like that's what I tried to do, and a lot of other people tried to do at Worcester Magazine, and I think a lot of people in Worcester journalism are still trying to do through newspapers or online media outlets. And same thing with library science. In a public library, you're trying to help people get the information that they want, need, make their lives better.
Do you have any advice that you give to people if they're like up-and-coming reporters in the city of Worcester, and they're like, what did you learn? What do you know about this business in this town?
It can be very intimidating coming to Worcester. I grew up in Maine, so, people in Worcester tend to think, okay, how long are you going to be here? Are you really committed to this city? Once you prove that you're interested in what they're doing and you want to take part in what they're doing, I think people will accept you and be more open to talking to you about what they're doing, and that I think that's key to being a journalist here, because you want those stories, you need those stories. Let people know what's going on, how are people really thinking, because in the end, I mean, just because you're a journalist, that doesn't mean that you're the be-all, end-all. You don't know exactly, maybe what the city needs, but the people around you, I think, are key. They're the ones who know.
There was definitely a time, and maybe that time is still happening, but there's definitely a time where I remember Worcester Magazine seemed to be doing an excellent job of grooming young journalists, that you had people like Scott Zobak or Jeremy Shulkin coming in with basically no experience and having a very publicly awkward first few months where they were getting stuff wrong, or just something about what they were doing was just not quite what it needed to be, but then things just clicking, and maybe part of it was building trust with people, and maybe part of it was understanding a little bit more about Worcester institutions, and then really becoming people who were like breaking stories and like important parts of the media landscape in the city of Worcester.
I think that's absolutely true. And you said institutions. I think that institutional knowledge in journalism is really, really, really important. And so holding on to those people, the Jeremy Shulkin, he left, but there's a woman, Kim Vassar, who I have to give a little bit of a shout out to. She works in production. You're probably not going to see her byline unless you look at who designed page one. But she's fabulous, and she's never been a reporter for Worcester Magazine, but her institutional knowledge of what stories, the paper has done over the past decade was so helpful to me as an editor, and I think really helpful to reporters too. And also, she can give some perspective as to, okay, we did that story, but as somebody who lives in the area, I think a lot of things have changed. So maybe it is time that we do this story again. So even as a designer, that knowledge I think is really important.
I'm curious to know. I bet your take on the near future of Worcester journalism is not as negative as mine of a house falling down in the woods. What do you see happening in the next few years, or what does your heart tell you is going to happen in the next few years around here?
I think that people are already starting to think about how do we get out of a slump that maybe we started to get in 2008. Economically, that, people say, oh, money shouldn't matter, especially in journalism. Forget sales, let's just do our job and do it right. But I don't think there's anybody that can say in any aspect of life that money doesn't have some sort of impact on how you do things. And everyone is still trying to figure out paywalls. How do we make money on online advertising? How do we make money in print journalism? I think that will be figured out. It's probably still going to take some time. And as that's happening, I think that the good journalists that are still in this city will have more resources to thrive, and I think it's a really exciting time.
You think, really?
I do.
I'm glad to hear you say that. I want to switch over to Mark here for a second. Mark, how you doing?
Good, I'm well, thanks.
I'm glad you're on. I'm glad you're able to make time to be on the show today.
Well, thank you.
So you're doing a project called the Worcester Sun.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about your background in Worcester journalism and what this new project is?
Sure. I started writing, I think, almost 30 years ago. I started writing out the Old Clinton Daily Item. Then I moved to and worked for the Telegram and Gazette back when they were separate papers. I joined the staff as a copy editor in 1990 and rose in the sports department to the position of assistant sports editor. Then I moved to the dark side in the technology. I became the deputy managing editor for technology. Had that job for a few years, and then was promoted to online director in 2009, where we instituted the first paywall. We did mobile. We did a whole bunch of other interesting stuff.
And so you have, speaking of institutional memory, it's a lot of experience in a lot of different positions, a lot of different parts of local journalism. And what is the Worcester Sun?
The Worcester Sun is an attempt to try a new model, try something new. We've seen what's happened. The TNG has been sold 4 times in about 18 months. And each time, or some of those times, we've seen that there have been dramatic cutbacks on staff, and especially in the newsroom. And we looked at that and said that, this is a problem for them, but it's an opportunity for everybody else, because there's the business of journalism, and then there's the journalism itself. And there are some really interesting things going on journalistically in Worcester. But the business of journalism, as we see, it's ending in a consolidation mode with, large companies buying a bunch of property, centralizing functions, reducing staff, and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And that's their business model. But I think that there's still a lot of opportunity with people who are journalists and former journalists within the city to create something new. So we're basically trying to reset the value proposition of local news by saying, okay, we're effectively starting over again. We're going to do a paid Sunday newspaper. It's going to cost $1. Online will be $1. We're not going to write TZ social media headlines. We're not going to, you won't believe what City Manager Augustus said. We're never going to do that sort of stuff. We're just going to play it straight and present the news. And we think that there's an opportunity now in the city for that type of an approach.
That's interesting. So it's going to be, so right now you have a Kickstarter for this.
Yes.
You're trying to raise $150,000?
$150,000, yeah.
It seems like a very ambitious goal.
It is, but there are a lot of things that go into that. I mean, first of all, we're not going to be, I'm not going to be drawing a salary during this. This is to grow the business. And a lot of the costs of print, are tied in with when we print and distribute, especially
Right.
early on, and then build the technology to support a function that says we're going to have digital subscribers and print subscribers and print advertisers and digital advertisers, and that sort of stuff takes money to get up and get running. So we think that when we sharpened our pencil and went back and said, for $150,000 we can do this. We can start to create a new model, sustainable model, where at the end of the day, while we're focused on the business end of it, journalism is the North Star. Right. This is what it's all about. So we're very excited about the response so far from the city. It's been just overwhelmingly positive.
Oh, that's fantastic. So I mean, like, when I've been talking about this with people, the big question has been, I think, what would this do differently? Because I think that the news market in Worcester is a competitive market and a shrinking market. So if somebody was going to come in and say, I have a new hobbyist project or a new nonprofit project, I would say that's interesting. When they say I have a new for-profit thing, something that's going to work in the market, I would think to myself, how is that going to fit into the market? And it sounds like what you are proposing is something a little bit different, in that it's a paid weekly paper, obviously with a website.
Yes. And we think that there's an opportunity there for a number of things. First of all, I don't think that there's a loss in the market. I think that there's still an appetite for that, and everybody I've talked to, both inside of with media experience, without, say, people will respond to this. People will respond if this is good journalism, if that's what you're focusing on, those types of stories. They won't respond if it's something that you can find anywhere else. Now, you've seen on the journalistic side, you've seen a lot of interesting things. You've seen Mass Live come in. You've seen Go Local. You've seen, obviously the work that's been the great work that's been done at Worcester Magazine. You see a lot of interesting stuff, and you'll have a lot of that stuff. But if you go back on the day-to-day, what do you see? You see a lot of that, not so much from Worcester Magazine, but a lot from, Go Local and from Mass Live and from Worcester. They're running, a lot of them are covering the same types of stories. We're not going to, we're not going to do that, because we can't do as good a job as they will do. But what we can do a good job in is saying, okay, instead of trying to do 4 stories in one day, you're going to have the reporter you're going to have a week or 2 weeks. We want you to dig into this story, and we want this story to be the one that people talk about, not for just a day, but for a week.
So I'm interested in a specific example. So a week like this, if the Worcester Sun had been up and running for 6 months at this point,
Sure.
what would we have seen in the Worcester Sun this week?
Well, what I wouldn't have, hopefully if we do this the way we intend to do it, whether it's talking about the snowstorm or whatever, we're not going to be responding to events on the ground. We're going to be responding to larger civic events that will take a little bit more time. So we're not going to have the turnaround time that a lot of people will have, and we're not going to apologize for that because these things take time and scheduled months ahead of time of these are the type of stories that we do. We've just had a tremendous blizzard. One thing I can guarantee is that we probably wouldn't be writing about the blizzard. That wouldn't be our centerpiece. Would we have something about it? Sure. Is that going to be what we spend most of our resources covering? No.
So what kinds of stories, whenever you say civic stories or other
We're talking about what, obviously the homelessness issue is, homeless, around civic events, homelessness, education, healthcare, those types of stories. The real impact of colleges, what's happening, how can we help bring, if Worcester is a college town, how do we make it more of a college town? Those type of macro issues or meta issues, as the meta stories, to take a step back and say, what does this mean? Because we think that what digital journalism does great is that it's made the who, what, when, and where pretty much ubiquitous. But we see that there's a lot less of the why journalism, a lot less people covering the why, and that's what we want to do.
I want to ask you a question about the rollout, just because people have asked me about this. And I
Yeah.
guess whenever somebody starts a business, I think people may ask some questions, but they don't necessarily feel entitled to answers.
Sure.
But whenever you have a Kickstarter, it's like you've published a little piece of the littlest piece of your balance sheet.
Yeah.
So people were like, what else is
Sure.
on there? Like, I want to know more if I'm going to ante up some money. And full disclosure, I gave $1. If you wonder
Thank you
why,
very much.
if you wonder why this Kickstarter is not an even multiple of 5, it's because I gave $1. Like, why? I guess I'm going like $150,000. Like, where does that go? What does the staff for this project look like long term?
Yeah.
What are the economics of this?
Well, in the long term, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but in the
Sure.
long term, do we have a 5-year plan and a 7-year plan? Yeah, absolutely we do. But the big thing now is to launch this as a consumer-friendly, user-friendly website, paid website, and as a print newspaper. Because the key to us is being a full-fledged media company. And a full-fledged media company, if you stand back and look at it objectively, has to include print. It just does, because it affords a credibility that digital only doesn't have. We think that it allows us to create a consumer revenue stream, which we think is important going forward. It's another alternative source of funding rather than just trying to go nonprofit. We think that there's a nonprofit model will work. We don't think that works for us.
Right.
But what we do think is that if we came in and the journalism is our North Star, and if we look at the business saying, no, we're going to grow this business and we're going to reinvest everything that we do, then this is a digital and Sunday print is the best way to start. But yes, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but we do have a plan for additional areas of content to cover, additional digital products, digital services, and a big move into the video space, because we think that that's important as well. But right now, this is the 150. The ask was the 150,000 was. Let's start to create a company. Let's start to create a company that's based on solid journalism. It's based locally, where all the functions of a newspaper are done locally, and that has a pledge to reinvest in jobs and in additional news as we grow.
This seems like a really interesting case for Kickstarter, because obviously traditionally the way people would do something like this is they would either take a little bit of their savings, start up a little something, grow it over a long period of time, or they would go to people who had money and say, you should buy in and we're going to have a big splash because you're going to give us whatever amount of money.
Yeah.
This is sort of saying to the community of Worcester, like, all right, $150,000 is a lot of money. Doing a weekly newspaper is a big thing.
Yeah.
Like, if people are interested enough to put in the money and, you're I think basically pre-subscribing, but
Yeah.
whenever you put money into the Kickstarter, if people are that interested and people are willing to ante up in the community, we are willing to carry it forward.
Well, first thing is I can tell you, and my wife will tell you, that this is not just a Kickstarter. We're hitting our savings a lot to do this, because this is a big deal to get the technology right. We are not a technology company, but we understand we have to get I know that we have to get the technology right.
What are you going to use as your CMS?
We're going to being a technologist, and we're right now, it's looking like we won't use a full-blown CMS.
Okay.
But the theory is, I think you're right. Part of this is, will the communities do it? Will the Worcester community support it? The other universe we're trying to go after and make realize that this is possible is the community of former journalists, those who nationwide who've been outsourced. We did a thing. I think it's if we got $8 from every person whose newsroom position has been eliminated since 2004, that would more than meet the goal of $150,000. And we're been very transparent about we will share what we learn with anybody who wants to try this in another city.
That's fantastic.
And so that's what we're hoping. And then the third one, which I started to get a hint of yesterday, which we really didn't plan for, was we're getting a pretty good response from mid-career professionals who, if they haven't been downsized because things have been restructured or moved to another place, the mid-career professionals who are worried about that. I actually got a couple of touching emails about that yesterday, and I was very heartened by that. That this argument of, local, hire, the people are important, and the institutional memory is important, as Brittany pointed out. All those things are important, and that's it seems to be striking a nerve with that community as well.
Well, good luck. I hope it works out.
Thank you.
Somebody had written in saying that we should talk about sidewalk shoveling. At this point, I spent too much time this week shoveling sidewalks. I can't talk about it today. But one thing we could talk about, Brittany Durgan, is dealing with the winter cold. Because a lot of people in Worcester totally know how to do it, and a lot of people in Worcester are late coming to New England, and they're walking around on a 10 below day wearing a t-shirt and no hat, and I just want to give them a hug and help them and teach them something. Can we give people some tips?
If you live in New England, it's inevitable that it's going to snow and or it's going to be cold. So be prepared, definitely. People might say, well, I don't have this or I don't have that. Prepare. You know it's coming. Cover your face. That is.
What do you use, like a scarf?
I actually have it right over here.
I also have gear. This is going to be great.
All right, great.
We haven't had a gear episode in a while.
So
Let's go ahead.
Definitely put the face mask or scarf or whatever on first.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that, if I can pull your hair in or out, whatever. Put it up around your face. Also, put it up around your ears. And then, when you put your hat on, you do it just right, the hat will go over the top of the face warmer so that you're completely covered.
Your head is important, your neck is important.
Mm-hmm.
There's old wives' tales about how you lose 25% of your energy or something through your head. This is not true, but you still lose a huge amount of energy through your head.
You do.
Here's what I want to show. I got two things here. This thing, people call this a snow cleat. You know about these? I've gone to the ER from falling on the sidewalk in Worcester. Every year people go to the ER. And at some point you realize you just can't walk on ice and snow for that long. If you're a serious pedestrian, I think you got to buy these. Sometimes people have yak tracks. They have a little springy things. These are called Due North Every Day. They have these little spiky things. So you can't walk on a wooden floor with them. But you just pop these on your shoes and you're good to go. You're never going to slip with these. And they cost you like $20 or $30, which is a lot of money. And you know what? They fall off, they break, you lose them. You're going to have to buy a pair of these every year. Way better than breaking your arm. Way better than, breaking your shoulder. The other thing I want to show you is, speaking of covering your face, is this. I just love this. This is a fleece hoodie. You could hold this up. This is very eccentric. More people need to wear this so it will be less eccentric. This is a Patagonia fleece hoodie. I wear a t-shirt every day. Then I wear this. Then I wear some other shirt over the top. This thing will zip up, covering your whole bottom of your face with this hoodie thing here. It's very thin. It has an extra long bottom so you can tuck it in. It's got these little thumb loops. And people look at, so you wear this and it rides up on your wrist. And people will look at that and be like, are you pretending to be a mountain climber? Why are you doing that? There's a huge number of blood vessels that are right here on the surface of your wrist and also on your feet. And you got to protect that area. And there's no way, you're wearing a regular jacket, you're wearing regular mittens and gloves. This area is always going to be open. You're always going to get cold there. Don't let it happen, people. Don't let it happen. That's my suggestion. Do you have any other thoughts about what people need to be doing to stay warm?
Well, I've always been one to think that fashion should not come over function,
Mm-hmm.
but because it does for some people, I think that women should take advantage that yoga pants are really popular right now.
Mm-hmm.
I do not wear yoga pants by themselves out in public, but some people do. I am wearing them right now underneath my jeans, and it also is popular now to wear LL Bean boots. And if you get the insulated ones, they're really warm. Or you can just wear really nice wool socks underneath. And so there you go. 3 popular things all put together so you can still look cool and be warm at the same time.
Cover your head, cover your hands, cover your feet. Don't slip on the ice.
Yeah.
Stay safe, people. It's going to snow again. It's going to be cold again. I know people keep their fingers crossed and they think this is the last time it's ever going to snow in Worcester. I predict that it's not. I predict it will snow again. Mm-hmm. You don't live your life. Don't live your life that way, man. Well, guys, thanks for being on the show. I want to ask you one last question. What are you excited about or interested in as far as Worcester journalism projects besides the Worcester Sun?
I think that there's an enormous opportunity for there's enormous opportunity that's already being done with people writing, having their own blogs, or in the case of your show, having their own show. And I think a lot of that could benefit from discoverability. I think that there's a lot of things out there because it is so many people doing so many interesting things out there. I'd like to be able to say that if there was a project to start to at least have that type of discoverability, there would be a really interesting project.
Brittany Durgan.
I don't know if this is something that will actually happen, but it's something that I hope happens. I think you mentioned college. This is a college town.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, I think most of us have seen the New York Times article about this being a college town. There are obviously a lot of college students here, but I don't think that the resources, whether it be the schools themselves or the students, are being taken advantage of. I know for a fact there are projects being worked on at WPI, Worcester State, every single school. There's research or any sort of project going on there that I think could make a great story in any newspaper. And also building on students that maybe are interested in journalism and their connections that maybe a longtime journalist in a newsroom might not have. So taking advantage of those things, I think, could bring some insight into some of the more underground things that are going on in Worcester.
I have to say, the thing I'm mostly excited about is my own projects. I don't expect anybody else to be excited about them. But, doing 508, doing Happiness Pony, every week I write an email explaining what's on the city council agenda. I remain enthused by these projects. Mass Live has been really impressive to me. Go Local Worcester and Mass Live, I think, have a similar kind of demographic or similar kind of thing that they're kind of doing. But whereas Go Local never really seemed to do the hard news stuff with a lot of passion or a lot of intensity, Mass Live really has gone more the hard news route. And although they make missteps, they seem to be getting better month after month, and they seem to be keeping at it month after month. And boy, I really can imagine a year from now, if they just keep going this way, that they're really going to be something that people are talking about every day walking down the street. Anyway, we're out of time. Thanks for being on the show, guys. Brittany Durgan.
Thank you.
Mark Henderson. I'm Michael Benedetti. If you inevitably have complaints about this show, you can email me at pieandcoffee@gmail.com. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.